Good afternoon. Hi, friends. This is actually the last of the Patreon videos for April 2020. Hatstand 4510, I save yours for last. This is going to be a surprise. I'm very excited. I get to start something new. And the reason I get to start something new is because the Mushishi series that I was watching is now no longer available to stream. And we were trying to figure out how to get DVDs to me, and then a global pandemic broke out. So that's not going to happen anytime soon. So in the meantime, I don't know anything at all about this, except for that tonally it's apparently very different from Mushishi. So this is called The Benevolence Archives, and this is volume 1 by Luther M. Seiler. I don't know anything about it except for that this is an indie author, and I'm very excited to support an indie author, hopefully get people interested in whatever it is this is. I don't know anything except that it's called The Benevolence Archives. So I'm actually going to read 2 of these stories because the first one is so short. So I'm going to do 2 in one video for this first one. And all of this is my gift to you, Hatstand4510, for supporting me on Patreon for April 2020. I almost said 4020. I'm fine. It's fine. I need to moisturize my hands more. That's the problem. Okay, anyway. So yes, I don't know shit about... I was not pitched on this. It wasn't given even a genre. I assume it's speculative fiction, since it tends to be what I'm asked to read or watch. So anyway, this story is called The Planet It's Farthest From, and it's the Benevolence Archives 1. I assume that each of these stories is numbered. I don't know shit about any of this. Anyway, this is a great start. And hopefully an intentional reference, because I don't know anything, but I have a bad feeling about this, the gnome thought. Gnome? Okay, there's gnomes. And also, Star Wars, maybe? Okay. The saloon had a bad reputation, but precious little on this backwards shithole of a planet was thought of highly. The only thing that Cthulhu was known to export was exotic fevers and several deep space-capable varieties of mold. This is real fun to read right now. There was indigenous life that had been rumored to have reached sentience, but having met several of the locals, he was unconvinced. The saloon was located at the ass end of a wide patch that had been hacked out of Cthulhu's ubiquitous jungle. It was one of 6 in a tiny trading depot, barely worth the name. The gnome could... Is this a gnome on another planet? Is this like gnomes in space? Which, by the way, I've never read a story with gnomes in space. Anyway, the gnome couldn't think of a single thing he might want enough to travel to Cthulhu in order to get it. Well, one thing. It was inside the saloon. He'd have to go inside to get it. I bet it smells terrible in there. Gnomes were blessed with an especially keen sense of smell, something that felt less like an adaptation when it couldn't be turned off in malodorous places. He smoothed his fur. Gnome has fur. That's interesting. And adjusted his clothing, making sure his assortment of weapons were all in the right places. Easy enough to reach, less easy to detect in a quick pat down, and strode toward the door. The door was rather bigger than he'd expected it to be. Like literally bigger, like you can't reach up and... I'm assuming that the gnomes are short. Are they tall gnomes? Can they be gnomes if they're tall? I don't know. Anyway, oh hell, he thought. This was not a good sign. He put his shoulder into the door, pushing it open slowly. The gnome was large for his species, okay, but that still put him at barely over 1¼ meters tall, even with the lifts he'd had installed in his boots. That's fascinating. The door was clearly built for a species much larger than he was. Always do your own research, you idiot, he thought. This is surprising. He hadn't been prepared for an ogre bar. Ogre. Fuck genres. Who cares? I love it. Fantasy characters in a sci-fi... Yes, hell yes. All right. Someone had failed to let him know that he was going to be looking for his target in an ogre bar. The only question was who to choose to blame. The saloon, unsurprisingly, stank of ogre. An odd mix of sweat, lubricant, and a spice the gnome had never managed to identify. It was surprisingly full. Apparently it was happy hour, or whatever ogres called that. Glower hour, he thought, hating himself a little bit for the thought. Clientele was about what he'd expected, overheated, mostly male, sweaty, and mostly twice his size. Ogres were by far the largest of the recognized galactic types. They ranged from 2 meters at the small end to nearly 3 meters tall, and were generally as muscle-bound as they were oversized. Most of the patrons had legs thicker than he was. and most of them were staring at him, scattered pairs of red eyes glowing in the darkened room. Several were openly laughing. A great start. He looked around. That was me. That's not the story. He looked around, giving his eyes a moment to adjust, and spotted an empty stool at the bar. The half-ogre half-ogre is one word. What was that? Sitting next to the empty stool looked just as unfriendly as the others, but was noticeably less massive than the rest of the clientele. He also hadn't turned around yet. Stride, he thought, and did his short-legged best not to look like he was waddling as he walked to the stool. Cheers to that. Oh my God. Which was taller than he was. He cursed under his breath. Always do your own research. He climbed up the stool, which lifted him just high enough to see over the top of the bar, which surprisingly gleamed. It was the one thing in the saloon that looked like it had any attention paid to keeping it clean. He cursed again, and stood on the seat, pounding on the bar a few times to attract the barkeep's attention. The barkeep did not appear to appreciate the gesture. Just one thing after another. We don't serve your kind here, he snarled. I don't even have cups in goblin size. You see a kiddie table around here? I'm a gnome. First of all, that reveals that goblins are in this world, too. I'm a gnome, the gnome responded, sighing theatrically. Not a goblin. Look at me. I'm wearing clothes. Unless they make you taller, I don't fucking care. The barkeep retorted, oh no. Pulling his lips back and raising his voice a bit. His teeth were filed. That's fun. I ain't gonna repeat myself neither. My money spends, the gnome said, trying not to notice that the saloon was getting noticeably quieter than it had been when he'd entered. How about we start with me buying my friend here a drink? He gestured toward the half-ogre next to him, hoping that his neighbor was in a reasonable mood. I feel like this answers that question. The half-ogre pulled a knife from a sheath and slammed it into the bar, burying the tip of the blade 3 inches deep in the wood. Not so much then. Why did you even bring that with you? The gnome had time to squeak, and then all hell broke loose. What? The bartender, roaring, swung a bottle at... Oh, because you just jammed a knife into his bar, which the barkeep kept very clean. The bartender, roaring, swung a bottle at the half-ogre's head, a bottle that was snatched from his hand and hurled across the saloon so quickly and easily that it almost looked practice. But what? The bottle struck a mirrored wall and shattered, spraying something foul-smelling and thick over a table of 4 sitting underneath it. 3 of the 4, all females, shrieked. The 4th, a male who had been directly under where the bottle struck the wall, was completely drenched, so this is just going to be chaos all the time then. He stood up and tossed the table out of his way. The gnome took this in and then looked back at the bartender and his former seatmate, not sure which direction to bolt. Just any at this point. Just fucking leave. Run, the bartender growled, settling the issue. Right. Bartender's like, don't even get involved. The half-ogre pushed his sleeves back, revealing arms covered in tattoos and a pair of wicked gladiator's gloves on his hands. Sweet! Right then, the gnome thought, this was not going as he had expected. What species did he think was going to be there, by the way? It had been a while since he'd been in a bar fight. It had been longer since he'd been in one where the furniture was all bigger than he was. He leapt from his stool, hitting the floor hard and rolling underneath the table. The fight was already spreading, a pair of ogres having taken unkindly to having had a table thrown at them, and a few others apparently joining in for the sheer joy of it. A hand clamped down on his ankle, and most of his shin. It was a large hand. The gnome was dragged unceremoniously from underneath the table and shaken in the air. Oh, God. It was the seatmate who grinned at him and hurled him bodily at the drink-soaked ogre across the saloon. So now he's just a projectile. The gnome flew through the air, hitting Wet Ogre in the chest. It's capitalized, because that's Wet Ogre's name. And clinging for dear life to his clothes, digging his hands into the ogre's vest and holding on. Save me, he shrieked. I have money. He climbed up to Wet Ogre's chest, swinging himself over his head and clinging to him like a backpack. Also maybe a Star Wars reference, because that's how Luke wore Yoda. The other responded by whirling, trying to knock him off. He leapt instead, landing behind the bar and fleeing through a nearby door. As it turned out, it smelled even worse than the kitchen, but at least it was empty. The sounds of combat intensified behind him, the first telltale whines of laser blasts joining the melee. Why was this gnome going there? Window. It was higher than it should have been, of course, but at least it was open. The gnome leapt up onto a countertop and from there to the window, clambering through and dropping to the ground outside, losing a few buttons off his shirt in the process. He fled, retreating to a darkened alleyway a few blocks away. In the distance, he heard sirens. The local constabulary was actually responding, surprising for a place like this. As fast as the saloon had dissolved into chaos, bar fights had to be a common occurrence. He waited, watching back toward the saloon, not willing to trust the open streets just yet. The planet was in unclaimed territory, far from gnome space. Fucking gnome space, meaning that there's this part in space for the gnomes. What the fuck? And he was probably the only gnome in the settlement. It was likely that the constables would be looking for him soon, and probably not to see if he'd had any medical attention. A few more minutes of noisy chaos, and a shadow detached itself from the wall ahead of him. An uncomfortably large shadow. No way. What the fuck is this? Brazel. The gnome breathed a sigh of relief. Grond? Okay, so the gnome's name is Brazel, I assume? You should hope so, the half-ogre said, shaking blood from one of his gladiator gloves. Oh, wait, what the fuck? Everyone else back there is busy blaming the fight on you. Did you get it? Did I get it? Of course I got it, Brazel said, insulted. He held up a data chip. I got the chip, his money, a shiv, and 2 different data pads to go with it. I'd have lifted his gun too if he hadn't spun around so fast. What the fuck? You care to explain why you didn't mention we were going to a fucking ogre bar? Did I forget to mention that? Grond said, sounding confused. I can't imagine why. Sometimes I forget how short you are, you know. Was there something wrong with the plan? Ass, Brazel retorted. The plan was that you'd create a distraction and I'd lift the chip. In and out, easy. I was expecting you to bump into him or something, not to get chucked at him like a bloody throwing knife. Though, really good distraction plan, I gotta say. I was not expecting this. Exciting, wasn't it? Grant said, chuckling. Can we go now, or do you want to yell at me for a bit longer? He cocked his head, listening to the sirens, which were growing louder. I bet I can convince the authorities I've captured you. We could charge more if we have to break you out of jail before we bring the chip back. I'm taking 2/3 of the take, Brazel said. It's the least I deserve for being used as a projectile. But Grond was right. It was time to get back to the ship. Revenge could come later. Holy shit. What the fuck? So this is... Okay, wait. Okay, I thought these were short stories. I assumed, or maybe they're... What the... Oh, fuck. Maybe this is a novella? I don't fucking know shit about this at all. All right. Let's move on. Since that was short, we'll keep going. This is called The Closet. It's from the Benevolence Archives 3. So we're skipping 2. I don't know what happened to 2. I don't know where it is. But it's the same character. Okay, all right, okay. Found us something to do, the gnome said. Details, the half-ogre responded, not bothering to look up from his book. Brazel could be long-winded, and it was better to let him do the explaining than ask questions. It's actually pretty straightforward, the gnome said. Somebody owes Prescott some money. He wants it back. Grond waited. Brazel didn't add any details. He happened to say how. It's up to us, apparently, the gnome replied, grinning. We can steal it back, convince the fellow to hand it over voluntarily, or just beat it out of him. Complete discretion. I asked Rundy how pissed Prescott seemed about it. She said it sounded pretty routine. It was never routine to owe Prescott money, Grond thought. Prescott handing off carte blanche on getting his money back to a couple of freelancers was a little bit on the unusual side, but they'd worked for him before. He'd normally have handled something like that himself. Maybe it really just wasn't a big deal for him to bother. Here's the dossier, Brazel said, tossing a data pad in Grond's direction. Okay, so they're like mercenaries? Whatever, heists. I feel like heists are going to be a constant theme of this, and y'all know I love heists, so good job, Hatstan. Grond caught the thing one-handed, carefully setting his book aside and putting his reading glasses on top of it. The glasses were an affectation. He only wore them when he was reading something that was actually on paper. They helped him pull him deeper into his reading somehow. The target's name was Arakin Darl. The dossier listed an address in a rough neighborhood in a large city on a basic terrestrial planet relatively nearby, on the border zone between gnomish and dwarven territory. Okay? There's dwarves. What else is there? The pictures included were of a human male, 22 years old, of slight build. He looked like a junkie. Grond raised a scarred eyebrow at the amount he owed. Oh boy. How'd this kid get into Prescott for $30,000, he asked. He doesn't look like he's seen half that in his entire lifetime. Prescott was rich enough that he could have written off the debt with little trouble, but this amount of debt hardly seemed routine. No details, Brazel said. I'd have told you already. For all I know, he borrowed 5 and the rest is interest. It would take about a day to get there, Grand considered. Maybe another 2 or 3 days to find the kid and scope the place out. Another day to get back, assuming there were no complications. He didn't have anything he needed to do in the next 5 days. Usual rate? Plus 10%, Brazel said. He's still being nice to us after the bullshit we got into last time. Oh, okay, which is what? Grand nodded, chuckling. I mean, that could be the bar. Brazel had burned off a third of his fur the last time they'd done a job for Prescott. Oh my god! Their usual rate now included a grooming rider. Why are there not more riders in heists? Oh my god, shit. Anyway, give me an hour, he said. I'll meet you at the dock. 3 days later, they'd found the kid and had had him under near constant bot surveillance for a day and a half. Brazel had spent the time watching him while Grand and Rundi checked every source they had for information about him. Other than owing unsavory people money, the kid was boring. He was a student. Sorry, I just had a thought. Headstand, I'm going to share it now. What if this 30,000 is just student debt? It's just student debt. That's believable, right? Oh boy. I always wonder why hackers just didn't just delete all student. Just fucking do it. Anyway, he was a student, if you could believe that, spending most of his time commuting back and forth to class or in the library. The apartment was in a rougher part of town, but the kid seemed to live there mostly because the rents were cheap. Brazel and Grand hadn't seen him do a single thing that rated as dangerous, much less interesting, the entire time. The junkie look appeared to be just that, a look. The kid was just skinny. He'll be the scariest thing he's ever seen, Brazel said. How do you want to handle this? You stay with the ship, Grand said. Stay nearby in case I end up throwing him out of a window or something. I may need you to catch him. The building's size for bigs, so I'll go get the money, or his head, or I'll play it by ear. My ears, I hope, Brazel said. Grand's were mostly either scar tissue or missing. Okay. Oh my god. Joke away, pipsqueak, Grand growled. Only one of us gets to be pretty. Okay, I'm already into this buddy cop vibe. Because y'all know I love buddy cop. That whole dynamic. Grand didn't pass a single person on the way into the apartment block and rode an empty hoverlift to the kid's place on the 114th floor. No thank you. Would not. Absolutely would not live in a place that high up. He wasn't home, which they knew. They'd watched him leave an hour before, and Brazel was keeping an eye on him. The first option was to toss this place and see if there was anything to steal, but Grand could tell seconds after breaking in that this wasn't going to be the case. The only thing in the apartment that looked expensive was a desk console that rivaled the one in Rundi's office, but even for Grand, something like that was too big to be portable. The kid doesn't have much money, Grand thought, but he has priorities. He spends it on the things he needs. And somehow that involves getting $30,000 in debt? What the fuck? The fabric in the corner had come standard with the apartment. The furniture was second-hand. The desk console was handprint locked. Hackable, certainly, but electronics were generally Brazel's thing. He certainly wasn't going to be able to convince the console that his hands were human. He spent a few minutes rummaging through cabinets in the bedroom's one closet. No luck. He almost missed the false door. Oh, shit. Sorry, I just kicked my desk. It only took him a minute to pick the lock. His eyes widened when he saw what was behind it. He opened a comm channel to Brazel. Brazel, we gotta pull out of this. Too late, Brazel said. Oh, shit. He just got home. Was about to tell you. He should be upstairs in a couple of minutes. Alone. What's wrong? Shit. Just be ready for me to need to go fast, Grand said. What the fuck? The second the kid opened the door, Grand hit him in the head. You know what? There you go. Just take care of it like that. The kid collapsed instantly, bouncing off a wall on the way down. Huh, Grand thought. He'd expected a fight. Instead, he'd knocked the kid out cold with a single punch. Is he still even breathing? He was. Grand shrugged, tying him to a chair, stuffing a rag in his mouth and blindfolding him. Brazel, you sound less concerned than you did a few minutes ago, the gnome responded. Yeah, well, there's a fucking full suit of Benevolence armor hidden in a closet in the room. Benevolent. Okay, so there's Benevolence. What is Benevolence? 4 expensive-ass rifles, too. I figured the hardware was his. Looks like it isn't. Shit, he's dead, isn't he? Nah, but I hit him like I was hitting Benevolence. Not like I was hitting a half-size human with tissue paper for muscles. He'll be out for a few minutes. How do you want to play this? The suit and the rifles are worth the debt right there. I want to know where he got him, I think. Well, so do I. Stay where you are. I'll wake him up once I'm sure there aren't any more surprises in the apartment somewhere. We miss we miss something. What's benevolence? Benevolence. Oh shit. Okay, this is interesting. The kid was still out, so Gron took a harder look around the apartment, taking careful note of how thick the walls were, and looking carefully for anything that might hide a secret compartment. He shoved the furniture around, checking underneath the bed and moving rugs. Nothing. The apartment's only secret seemed to be the hidden space in the closet, and Gron had that cleaned out in minutes, pulling the suit of armor and guns in front of the kid. Anything else he's hiding is going to be software in the desk, he thought. Excuse me. Brace. See if you can remotely hack into the desk console. Pull everything you can off it. We can steal it if we have to, but getting it out of here is going to be hell. Oh, on it, the gnome answered. And then a moment later, you may want to turn the thing on. Oh, that's helpful. Gron activated the desk startup sequence, displayed a hand outline on its surface, along with the text, confirm voice and hand match. He didn't speak, waiting patiently for Brazel. It didn't take long before the display started flickering. Nothing other than standard security programs, Gron. Namely, you'll have the Namely, you'll have the ice cracked in 5. Go ahead and wake him up if you haven't already. Gron glanced over at the kid, whose head slumped down as he turned around. Wake already. And he had the sense to stay quiet. Oh, he's not an idiot. But he's interesting. What is fucking going on? Shake your head if you hear me, boy. The kid's shoulders tightened up reflexively, and then he shook his head. Gron lowered his voice, speaking directly into the kid's ear. In a second, I'm going to take the blinders off of you and pull that rag out of your mouth. I need you to understand something, son. If I get the idea even for a second that you're lying to me, or even imagining using a spell on me... A spell? I'm sorry, what? What does that mean? What? I'm going to start solving that problem by ripping your jaw off. No big deal. Cool. I know people who can get the information I need from you straight out of your living brain. Okay. The rest of you does not have to be attached. Shake your head if you understand me. I didn't say piss yourself, Gron thought, as the kid shook his head, his pants darkening. So he's properly scared. All right. He walked back around in front of the kid again and took his blindfold off. The tears were already rolling down his cheeks. The bruise where Gron had hit him already livid and angry looking. Good, but we need a little bit more. He didn't touch the rag in his mouth, leaning forward and staring directly into the kid's eyes. His eyes brightened, losing their usual dark brown color and brightening to a fiery glowing red. Well, full ogres could do this with little effort. It had taken Gron months of practice. Half ogre. So, is this like he's half something else, or... Huh. What does that mean? Look carefully. Think about what you've gotten yourself into. Gron was dressed inconspicuously, wearing a heavy duster coat. When he'd entered the apartment building, he'd been wearing a hat. He stood up and shrugged the coat off. Underneath, he wore his gladiator clothes. 2 bandoliers. 2, y'all. 2. Not 1. 2. Crossed over his chest, both bristling with ammunition and bladed things of all descriptions. A breech clout, well-used gladiator's gloves on both hands, bristling with spikes and blades. Next to nothing else. Not that you could really tell. Gron's natural skin color was a pale yellow. Other than his hands and his head, though, virtually none of his original skin tone was even visible any longer. The tattoos, that's right. His entire torso, legs, and arms were covered in scar tissue and fantastically elaborate tattoos. Gron had spent his entire youth and a good chunk of his adult life enslaved and working as a pit fighter. What the fuck? The scars and tattoos were all trophies. Occasionally he thought about having his skin rejuvenated. He never did, precisely for moments like this. The kid started screaming into the rag, absurdly trying to get away. The chair shook. He wasn't going anywhere, though. One more thing. Oh, Jesus. Oh, jeez. Gron picked his bow up from the floor next to the kid's chair, snapped his wrist, unlocking the limbs, the bow's energy string shimmering into existence. You know what this is? Kid sat still, his eyes wide, still crying. Didn't shake his head yes or no. This is an Inkless sniper's longbow. Her name's Angela. Say hello. The kid didn't do anything. I don't blame him. Ron smiled, showing his front teeth. I said, fucking say hello, he said, putting every ounce of bass he could muster into his voice and tripling the volume. The kid screamed again, making sounds that would probably be hello and quite possibly, please God, no, help me, anyone, in the bargain. I can kill you with Angela from 2 clicks away with my eyes closed. If I have them open, it'll be 3. Go ahead and run around corners. I'll hit you anyway. That's what I can do if somehow you get out of the room, which has me in between you and the exit. And you don't know how many of my buddies are out there either. Ready for me to take the gag out? What the fuck is this? The kid nodded. Gron pulled out the gag. The kid sobbed, gasping for air. It looked like he'd shoved it into his throat a little farther than he'd intended to. Or he'd sucked part of it into his air pipe, what with all the screaming and pleading he was doing. You owe someone I know a whole goddamn lot of money. The kid blinked. You work for Jarek? Who's that? But also, wow, you probably just revealed a lot of information to Gron. Ha! Prescott. If anything, the name made him look even more panicked. I paid Prescott back. I swear I did. He doesn't think so. He thinks you're into him for 30,000. I only borrowed 12. Oh, Brazel was right. Let's make this conversation shorter. I don't care how much you borrowed, or why you borrowed it, or whether you paid Prescott back already, or who the hell this Jarek is. I care that I got hired to get Prescott's money back from what looked like a spike junkie, and instead I found a closet full of Benevolence hardware behind a fucking fake wall, which you will now explain to me so that I can decide whether I'm going to kill you or not. Benevolence? What? He's got it. He's just faking it, right? Gron moved out of the way, showing the kid the pile of armor and guns. He screamed again. It's not mine. None of it. I've never seen any of that shit before. Fuck, I gamble. I owe a couple of boogies some money. You think I'm stupid enough to fuck with the Benevolence? Are you crazy? What is the Benevolence? What the fuck? Timed perfectly, straight into his ear, Brazel spoke up. Gron, I think he's telling the truth. There's nothing but sports schedules and research data on city planning on that console. The kid's in engineering school. We didn't miss anything when we looked at him. The hardware's a goddamn coincidence. So did he inherit it from someone else when he got the apartment? What the fuck? I don't like coincidences, Gron muttered. He grabbed the chair the kid was tied to, lifted him 3 feet off the floor, and ripped the chair in half, tossing the wreckage into the corners of the room. The kid hit the floor hard, kicking feebly with his legs and screaming. Gron grabbed him by the face, lifting him back off the floor again. Come here, you lucky asshole. Right. He dragged him across the apartment, shoving him into the false room in the back of the closet. You're telling me you live here and you never knew about any of this? I moved in a month ago. Fuck, I'm never even here. I spent all my time at school. Hell no. I've never seen this. He's telling the truth. Gron had never seen anybody so obviously scared shitless he didn't have enough brain power left to construct a lie. Count to 1,000. He told him, you should be able to break out before you starve to death in there. I'm taking all your shit and giving it to Prescott. That'll get him off your back. Let me make a suggestion. Don't ever gamble again. I see you, I'm going to kill you. Not waiting for an answer, he slammed the kid into the back of the hidden space and closed and locked both the doors. Pick up now, he said over the comm. I'm tossing his couch out the window in 30 seconds. Meet me there with the cargo door open. I want to be outside the atmosphere in 5 minutes. Coming, Brazel said. Rundy will be so pleased when she finds out she gets to move Benevolence gear. We're keeping the difference too, Gron said. Think we ought to mention it to Prescott? Yes, Brazel said. He's adding 20% to our usual fee next time. Oh, shit. Okay, that's the end of this chapter story. What are these? I don't actually know. What the fuck is Benevolence? What is this world? I don't know anything at all. Which is very exciting. Hatstand 4510. That was really good. That was a lot of fun. What is this? Very unexpected. I don't actually understand. Which is okay. That makes it exciting. So thank you very much, again, for supporting me on Patreon and letting me do what I do, which is be ridiculous and yell at all of you. I'll be back next month for more Patreon videos. Until then, thank you all. You're all the best. Thanks, Hatstand. See ya.